All right,
Well,
Tim, this is your game, so take it away.
okay. I listened in, Lauren, on your conversation with Mark, and it was interesting because I feel like a lot of the discussion that we had today, you covered bits and pieces of it, in terms of training philosophy. But I've been involved at the youth level for a long time now. If you count my junior high coaching days, probably 14 years. And I've always been really, really, really interested on the different ideas regarding youth training. My own ideas and philosophies have evolved over time. So the few brief conversations that I've had with you, and then kind of following some of just the posts that you do and some of the people that know you, I've been really interested in what you're doing with your youth training programs, kind of your overall philosophy behind it, and then definitely maybe some practical examples of how the common trouble situations you run into when you're teaching beginners or new youth players. So I'd love to just, if you want to start off by kind of covering that basis, what your general philosophy is and kind of some practical examples of how you use it, and then we can get into maybe some more specifics as we go.
Sure. That's a big question.
There's a lot.
What's your general philosophy? But
well, I mean,
no, I got
specifically,
it. I got it. I got it. We're good. So that I'm clear, when you speak about youth, what are you referring to?
Say 6 to 14 is specifically the ages I'm referring to, although we can discuss the older kids as well.
Okay, that helps me. In my mind, I think of every kid under the age of 18 as a youth.
Sure.
And so I just wanted to make sure we were clear on what you were referring to. It doesn't really matter. In some of the questions that you're probably going to have, there might be a differing answer. But as far as that one, what's our overall philosophy? It doesn't really matter. There's no distinction between that with any age level that we work with. And that I'm going to give a shout out to a friend of mine who I think both of you probably know, Michelle Goodall, who helped me find and I don't know, just drill down on a philosophy idea for what we do with our kids in our gym. And that really came down to the phrase, count it all joy. I guess if the world sees this, everyone's going to know, but I don't really care. I'm not a Bible person. I'm not somebody that is all into reading the Bible, and I don't really consider myself a Christian in that sense. But I guess that is a direct quote from somewhere in the Bible. I've been told a couple times where it is, but it's count it all joy. That's what our goal is for every kid that walks in our gym, is that they can count every minute that they're in our gym as a joyful minute, as a time that they enjoyed their life more than they were maybe outside of our gym. And so that's our goal when it comes to working with the youth and really any population that we work with in our gym. So
yeah, I like it.
Does that, and then as far as practical examples of what that looks like, I don't know. You ask a kid who comes into your gym, any gym in the world, ask a 10-year-old what they want to do, and they're probably going to say, I want to play. I want to have fun. And I want to do it with my friends. And so that's what our goal always is with that age range is, can we play and have fun with your friends? And if you can do that, you've got kids hooked and you've got kids loving life. So
yeah, that's remarkably similar to, I think the intent of it, the game. It's a game, right? We play it to enjoy it. We play it to have fun. So, with that background in mind, what does your training look like when you're teaching new kids volleyball?
We don't train. I think that's probably an important point. We don't train kids in our gym. Training is what you do for dogs that you want to have good at sniffing out drugs, or training is what you do for military guys who need to get good at defending our country. When you're working with kids who want to learn how to play a game for the joy of competing, hopefully eventually, I don't like to call it training. We just call it playing. We play. That's what we do in our gym. We just play. Like, it's all volleyball. That's a huge thing we throw out every single day in our gym. It's like everything we do is volleyball. It's just volleyball, and it's just playing. So, but that was an aside. To answer your question, as far as like what we do, it is going to differ depending on the age group. We have currently two or three primary age breakdowns within the age group that you're referring to. We have a 3rd through 6th grade program, and I totally realize that this is an internationally broadcast thing, and I have no idea what age groups that filters down to, like actual age. I'm so bad at age.
6th, I know, is U12, and so I believe 3rd is
so 10 to reach into
U8.
It's younger than that. I would say it's probably 8. My guess is
I think it's 8 to 9.
I know we've had 8-year-olds, and sometimes we bring in 7-year-olds. So I would go as far as saying it's 7 through 12. And then we have our age group above that, which is going, 7th through 8th grade, which is going to be that like probably 12 through 14-year-olds. And a lot of what we do with those age groups is the same, but a lot of what we do, not a lot, some of it is a little different. So like we really focus on manipulating the size of the court, the size of the height of the net, the weight of the ball, and the rules of the game in order to simplify the game for the athletes that are in front of us who are playing it. We don't like to isolate anything.
Yeah. So what size of court are we talking about? Are we talking about a split narrow court, full length? How high are we talking with the net? Those kind of things.
You could give me a number on any of those questions, and I'd probably tell you yes. At some point, we use that. I'm all about variability. I'm all about throwing as much different things at the kids as possible. Now, of course, if we're dealing with 8-year-olds, we're never going to put the net at 7'4".
Right.
And I guess it's important to clarify. I deal with primarily girls in my gym.
Okay.
Although, to be honest, if it was boys, I don't think we would do anything different at that age group. But 7'4" and whatever the minute breakdown is, 7'4" and what, a quarter? Is that what it is? I can't remember.
Quarter, I think. Yeah, something like that.
But anyway, whatever that, we don't ever see the net at that height for the kids in our 3rd through 6th grade program. I think it's kind of ludicrous to ask 3rd through 6th graders to play volleyball on the same size court, on the same height net, with the same ball that our Olympic volleyball players play with. I just think that's an incredibly short-sighted idea, and really ends up with a massive survivorship bias where the kids that are able to make it go on and get more training or coaching, and then everyone else falls out of it. You don't see that in very many other sports. In most sports, the implements of the game, the court size, everything is shrunk down to allow the players to have not only success, but to play it in the same way the adults are playing it. And that's important for us. I mean, we lower the net down to, I have no idea how high it is. We just, we take a kid and we bring a kid, the tallest kid in the group, over to the net and say, put your hand up, and we'll lower the net to just below her wrist. And then we'll say, all right, everybody's playing at this height. And, so that way we can have the kids blocking, working on hitting, and hitting instead of, your typical 8-year-old kid who's hitting on a women's net, they have to totally arch their back and look straight up in the air and hit the ball in a way that is not the same technique, is not the same body adjustments that they're going to have to make when they grow taller and are jumping higher. We want them to use the same solutions that they will use when they're older at a younger age when they're smaller, and we do that by making everything else smaller. As far as court size goes, we manipulate the court size in different ways. We have some different lines drawn on all of our courts. We have the four main ones that we use. We have the full-size court, and then we have a 3/4 court, which is 20 by 20. And then we have a medium court, which is, and these are rough estimates because our court is actually in metric size, but it's about, the medium-sized court is about 15 by 15. Or sorry, it's actually 15 by 20. So roughly half width and then 20 feet deep. And then we have a 10 by 10 courts.
Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. You said you do the net height by, you grab the tall kid, bring her over to the net, and say, put it a little bit under. That's exactly how I set up. If I'm in charge of summer camp and if I'm in charge of the littles and the beginners. So I set the net.
Yeah, I think we, meaning me, as well as everyone else, because I think I'm as guilty of it as anybody. We have this tendency to try to, we have this standard of how we play the game, and then we're going to force everybody to come to that standard instead of looking at who's in front of us and saying, how can we bring the standard to them and change that to their needs? Because again, it needs to be about, are they enjoying it? You take the typical 8-year-old and you ask them to play volleyball on a women's height net, there's no, on average, it doesn't even mean not even average, just like the vast majority of 8-year-olds are not going to be able to play what we as coaches are looking for as far as volleyball is concerned on a 7'4" net. But if you lower that net down and you manipulate the rules a little bit, suddenly you can get rallies. And you can see kids diving and digging balls, and you can see kids literally jumping and swinging hard at a ball. And they're playing volleyball. And maybe there's a couple little tweaks in there, but for the most part, they are playing volleyball. And so in my opinion, they're getting a much better sense of how the game is played rather than, you go anywhere, in our area, you go to the YMCA and you watch 8, 9, or 10-year-olds play volleyball, and it's, as they like to put it, bump, 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 and the ball goes over the net, and then it's bump, 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 and the ball goes over the net, if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
And that's it. Yeah, if you're lucky. I actually, when I first got into coaching, I started volunteering at a coach to 3rd and 4th graders, and it was just serve over the net or miss your serve. That was the whole game.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. And if you get the bump, 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 which is probably not going to happen, it's more like bump. And I'm only saying that, I hate that term, but I'm only saying that because that's how the kids love to talk about it. Like, you ask a kid who's 8 or 9 what normally happens after the person serves, and they're going to be like, well, there's a bump and then a bump and sometimes another bump. and that's how they play the game, and that's what their concept of volleyball is. That's what they really believe is the game of volleyball from their perspective as an 8 or 9-year-old. And
so let's say you have go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm fine.
So let's say you have a player coming into your gym who has little to no concept of the game, right? They're new to the game. How do you start them?
So if it's at that age level, we think the most important thing to get them to understand is the goal. when you look at a game like basketball or a game like soccer, or you can take it all the way to water polo or lacrosse, the goal is really obvious even to little kids because it's called the goal. It's a thing that's standing there with a net in it, and you know the goal is to get the ball to go into that. And whatever you do, as long as you follow the rules of the game, if you get the ball into that, that's a good thing. What we find is a lot of kids who come into volleyball at a young age have no idea what the goal is, or that there's actually multiple goals. And there's multiple ways to score a point in our game. There's not just one way. And so we start off by playing games that expose them to how we can score a point and how we win. You know, I love the idea of like winners stay on. I think that's something you got to throw at kids when they're as young as possible. We play a lot of Queen of the Court. It's even with like 8-year-olds. We'll play one-on-one Queen of the Court, but we'll simplify it and it becomes a game we call hot potato, where instead of volleyball skills, it's just catch and throw. Ball comes over the net, you catch it, you throw it. You can't hold on to it very long. If you hold on to it too long, the coach on that court will be like, nope, you lost, sorry. So you catch it, you throw it. You catch it, you throw it. And again, we just call that hot potato. And because every kid's probably played hot potato, and so they understand the concept. But at the same time, then we have to start talking to them about how to win. How do you win hot potato? Because if you get a group of girls, if you get 48-year-old girls together, and my experience has been 48-year-old boys together, and you say, okay, here's how you win. You get the ball to hit the ground inside the court on the other side of the net, and then you start playing hot potato. All they do is they throw the ball back and forth to each other for like 20 minutes.
Yes. Yep.
And so you're like, okay, you don't understand how to win. You just like being out there and you just want to be able to throw the ball back and forth to each other. So then we have to start encouraging them to like aim for space. How can you make them find it more difficult to catch the ball? Where do you need to throw the ball to make them struggle? Well, that's my friend. I don't want to make them struggle. Well, how are you going to help them get better if they don't struggle? So then they start to work on, and some kids come in and they get it immediately, you know, but that's a very small portion of it. Maybe they've got a more athletic background. Maybe they've got parents who played games with them that were more about winning. And I know I'm going to get lambasted for this statement, maybe, but boys get it quicker than girls. And, you know, boys are way more connected with the idea of being king of the hill than girls are. Girls want to be nice. And that's a very general statement because there's always girls that aren't that way. But by and large, the girls just want to be out there with the group and having fun. The boys want to be the guy that's left. They want to be the one guy left at the end who's standing on top of the hill. And so the boys do get it quicker, even though they might not start out understanding it. But that's, you know, with like an 8-year-old kid who walks in our gym, that's how we would start them out. Because there's a ton of movement involved. All of the movement is exactly the same movement they're going to use in volleyball as far as shuffling, lunging for a ball, jumping. And we start to challenge them with things. If it looks like they're really, this rally's going on forever, we start talking, well, do you think maybe how could you make the ball go down faster? And some kid's going to be like, well, if I jumped and throw it. Okay, so let's start thinking about that. Like you catch it, you jump, and you throw it. Or if nobody's able to volunteer that, we just introduce rules. One rule we've done that I like a lot is we tell them the only way you can throw the ball over the net is by taking the ball and touching your ponytail with it before you throw it. And you have to jump. So now they're learning to jump and bring the ball overhead into the court, even they're holding it. And a lot of kids struggle with that. But we think that over time kind of scaffolds itself into playing the game. But within that, then they're learning the different ways of scoring, because the first question is going to come up, right? We told them, you score by making the ball hit the ground on the other side of the net within the other person's court, whatever we've defined that as. So maybe we're playing on the 10 by 10 size court. So a kid jumps and throws the ball, a girl touches it, and the ball lands outside of that court. Kids who've never played volleyball before, the girl that touches it is going to be ecstatic. She's going to be like, I won. The ball landed outside my court. And we as coaches are standing there going, it's really obvious you lost. How could you think you won? They don't get it. They don't understand the rules. So then we get a great opportunity in that moment to teach the kids, well, here's one other way you can score. You actually don't need the ball to land inside their court. You just need to make sure it touches somebody on the other team before it lands out of bounds. And then you see the kids, like, their eyes get big. They're like, oh, that's even easier. Awesome. Like, let's go do that more. And then we, like a kid might, we will introduce blocking within that. So even though they're just holding the ball and jumping and throwing it, we'll talk to them about how could you stop the ball from ever even crossing the net so you never even have to worry about it. And some kid who's probably watched volleyball at some point is going to be like, oh, you could block. Okay, well, maybe you might want to block. And then if a kid touches the net, then we're talking to them about, that's actually illegal. We're not allowed to do that. That's another way the other team can score a point, is that you've touched the net. You've done something that's against the rules of our game. So, I mean, I think we say there's 5 different ways of scoring a point in volleyball. And so we get them on that page first. That's a big thing for us, is to get them to understand how the game is, what the goal of the game is, before we ever even talk to them about the skills, those pass, set, serve, block, hit, dig skills that people refer to as the fundamentals. To me, the fundamentals are what's the goal of the game, and how do I achieve that with my teammates if I have them, or by myself if it's just a one-on-one thing.
Okay. So let's say you've got that, right? They're understanding the goal, and you're moving on to maybe less catching, a little bit more live play. How are you teaching technique or how to play in the middle of that?
I mean, if we're talking 3rd through 6th graders, we don't teach technique. We teach them to play the game. Okay. If we help them understand the goal. We help them understand that sometimes getting a pass, a set, and a hit is the best way to score a point and win. Sometimes. It's not always. I'm not a big stickler about that idea that we always have to have 3 contacts. Why? I mean, I play doubles, and I can score on the first contact sometimes as easily as on the third. Why would I need 3 if I can use 1? And some of these kids who intentionally understand that, I'm never going to berate them or demean them or chastise them or punish them in any way for scoring on 1 when they could tell that that was the easiest way to score. We want kids who understand how to score, who understand how to win, more importantly than kids who are focused on how do I hold my arms to have a perfect platform, but then I don't ever touch the ball because I don't know how to move. To me, that's what we need more of, is getting these kids to understand the game first. How do we win the game? How do I stay on the court? And then that leads to their desire to learn the technique, right? Because consistency is an important part of being good. And so if a kid's always passing with one arm, and sometimes they get a great pass and sometimes they don't, now it's time to have a good conversation with them about, hey, how do you think you could be more consistent with passing that ball on serve receive so that your teammates have a better chance of setting it? And then a lot of times, especially with somebody who has no clue about volleyball, they're going to be like, I don't know. Well, and then I'm going to be like, well, why don't you go explore it? Like, do you think you'd be more consistent if you passed it with your foot? And honestly, I've had kids who say yes because they're soccer players. And they're like, yeah, I totally would. I'm like, all right, go try it. See if it works. And then they'll come back like 5 minutes later and be like, yeah, that's not working. This isn't soccer. I can't do that. Okay, so cool. So we've eliminated that possibility. What else can we work on? Like, do you think one arm has a bigger surface area than two arms? Does a bigger surface area help? And, you eventually lead kids to understand that a bigger surface area is going to help. So let's try two arms more often. And so then they try two arms, and then the ball's still going all over the place because the kid's bending their elbows every time. Well, you've got a bigger surface area, but you have 5 different angles on that surface. Which one is the ball going to go to? That's our problem, right? So, maybe if you just created one flat surface for that ball to bounce off of and go where you wanted it to, you might be more successful. Why don't you go try it and see how it goes? And so that's kind of how we guide them while they play, rather than remove them from play and say, do this, prescribing a movement that we've determined is the best choice. I don't want that. I want them to choose the movement solution that is best for them. And we guide them to the ones that tend to be pretty much the same across most of our sport. But we don't do it in a way that is prescriptive. We do it in a way that's more discovery oriented. Hopefully.
So I think so. So let's take maybe a little bit older, same age range, but instead of talking like 8, 9, 10s, let's talk about your 11s, 12s. Mm-hmm. They're getting, where they can rally, they can play some volleyball. And you're getting your concepts of pass set attack and they're doing things like that. How do you go about training or teaching or guiding? I guess guiding would be the right word here in your system. Things like decision making in terms of setting, in terms of directions of attack, things like that.
I think that really just comes down to getting the kids to be really clear with their attention, meaning what are they looking at, what are they paying attention to, what are they aware of, and then 2, what is their intention based on what they're aware of. So in reference to your setting idea, one of the statements, I guess, I don't remember who first said this to me, or maybe I just read it somewhere or whatever, but, if you don't like the answer, ask a better question. So, and keep that in mind for the rest of this webinar too, but, but I think that's really, what it comes down to when we're coaching. What a kid does on the volleyball court, what a kid chooses to do. So if we take a setter specifically, in a rally, a kid sets the outside hitter. That is their solution to the problem that's being posed by the situation. If we don't like the answer that they came up with, we need to ask a better question instead of just telling them the answer. Because you cannot help kids become better at decision making by taking away their opportunities to make decisions. You have to make great decision makers, you have to allow them to make decisions. And so instead of saying, oh, you should have set your middle on that one because it was a perfect pass, it then comes down to, well, let's ask better questions. What other options did you have right there? Do you feel like that was do you feel like that was your best option? Why did you set that person? I mean, ask a 7th grader, an average volleyball player, an average 7th grade volleyball player, that question. Why did you set that person? And if they give you an honest answer, which is maybe going to be rare, because when a coach asks a question of a 7th grader, they're going to give you the answer they think you want to hear, not the actual honest answer. But if they give you an honest answer, it's going to be, I don't know. Or it's going to be, that's my friend. Or it's going to be, she was the loudest. Right? Things that we don't ever want to be the answer. Okay, so we don't like the answer. then we need to ask a better question. And we need the game maybe to answer better and ask a better question. So like in a practice situation, if we've got a setter who's always making poor decisions, then we need to create a game that entices them to make better decisions. And if we can do that, then they learn from the constraints of the game or from the game itself that we designed, but it doesn't require us to be harping on them after every play and saying, you got to make better decisions. You got to, I mean, to me, that's a classic, like, adult saying something they think is the right thing to say, but is probably the worst thing you could say to somebody. You need to make better decisions. You just took away my ability to make decisions by telling me I need to make better decisions. Because now I'm going to start thinking, what do you want from me? Not actually making decisions. So instead, I think it needs to become, what other options do you have? What are you capable of doing? What are you confident with? What are you using to determine to set the ball? I mean, most seventh graders, in my opinion, set the ball based on the pass. The pass is probably 95% of where they set the ball. And then it's also their confidence in their ability to set the ball where, if you get a perfect pass and there's a setter who's really not confident about being able to push the ball to the left pin, they're going to set the middle a lot. And then there's also that factor of who's getting points. I mean, if we create an environment in which we're very focused on the game and how we win and how we score points, and you set someone and they score a point, my guess is you're going to set them again and again and again and again. So if we don't want them to set that person as much, we have to change how we score the game so that they are enticed into setting other people instead of just that one person. So that's, and as far as like if we took the decision-making idea into hitting, I think it's the same thing. Like, I don't know. My experience with the kids in our gym is the vast majority of them have no idea where they're hitting when they hit. They're just swinging. Yeah. They're hitting the ball and hoping it goes over the net. That's their number one thing. Is this going over the net? So when they get a kill, they're all like happy about it. Like, woo, I got a kill. But then I'll ask them, like, is that where you were hitting it? And they're like, I don't know. And then something I love to say to them is like, wouldn't it feel even better if you got a kill right in the spot where you were aiming for? And a lot of kids will like kind of nod and be like, oh yeah, like that would actually feel pretty cool. All right. So let's start thinking about the spots that we can get a kill in and thinking about that when we're swinging, like, or before we swing, what's available for me and where do I want to hit the ball instead of just going up and swinging and hoping. Sorry to relate back to in history, but hope is not a strategy, right? It's about being able to formulate a plan and execute that plan. So in the moment even, like our plan can be changing in microseconds based on what we see in front of us, but that's pretty much a more advanced concept, I think. With like a 7th or 8th grader, the average 7th or 8th grader, and I keep saying that because I totally understand there are 7th and 8th graders in this country, in the United States, who are far above and beyond anything I'm talking about right now. Not the kids in my gym. Right. They are, right. They're not those kids.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to just be willing to ask really great questions of them and guide them to solutions that are, I mean, even if a kid gets a kill, like a kid goes up and swings intentionally hitting the ball down the line, we could celebrate, which is great. I think that's important. But then we also have an opportunity to say, where else do you think you could have got a kill? Or what else could you have done right there? And that gets them to start thinking bigger. For instance, we had a kid this year before all this hit who was playing middle on her team. She's a 13-year-old playing on a mid-level 14s team. And she just totally got the fact that she could go up, show a big swing, and then just tip over the top of the block. And she would score 95% of the time on that. Like it was so easy for her. She was so good at it. And like her team just was like, just set her the ball. Like she's scoring points. The other team's not adjusting. Just keep setting her the ball. And, my hope was, of course, that the teams that she was playing against were going to adjust and take that away from her. They never did. She just kept scoring on it. So then I have to get either myself or ask her coach to go in and ask some questions. Is that all you want to be good at? Is that the only play in volleyball that you want to be good at? Do you want to be good at other things too? Do you want to be good at hitting the ball as hard as you can into the deep corners and getting a kill off that too? Do you want to be good at these other stuff? And so then we can say, then that allows us to ask her to take some risks outside of her comfort zone, outside of what she knows is going to work, and maybe fail on the process of doing so. But as long as her intent is there, as long as I was aiming for that corner, but it went out of bounds, cool. Keep aiming for the corner. You'll get it, So I think it is important to talk every single day with kids about decision making, but I think it's important to make it actually be a talk about making decisions and not a talk about this is what I want you to do as the coach, because that's not a decision.
Yeah, I'm currently on a break between college jobs, and stopped in to help with a local club that I work with all the time. And I told their director, I said, listen, since I'm going to be bouncing around from training to training, I'm not going to talk technique with your kids and with your players. All I'm going to do is ask them why they did things. So that's all I'm going to do. Hey, so tell me your thought process. What was your goal? Did you make it? Is that what you were going for? What else could you have done? Because I feel like decision making is being trained poorly. Getting these collegiate athletes, and they're doing what a coach told them to do. They're not making decisions. And so I was trying to trace that back to the roots, and I felt like being a youth coach for a long time and doing it myself, being guilty of many of these things myself and observing it done, we're not giving them the opportunity to make decisions. We're just telling them what to do. And so, since about January, that's what I've been doing. I've been bouncing practice to practice, just asking kids questions. They missed a serve and, hey, where were you aiming? And they look at you and they go, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's start there. Let's aim somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Go serve some more. And then once you can tell me where you were aiming, I'll come back and we'll have some more discussion. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about decision making.
Yeah, I think it's.
So let's.
Well, let me make a point on something you just said before we move on, and that is, you mentioned asking a kid why they've done something, and my opinion on this has changed in the last probably 2 years, and that is, if you ask Matt Anderson or Irvin Ngape or any of the top international players, if they can tell you why they chose to hit the ball where they did in the moment, they're going to give you an answer. But I don't think they actually think about it at the time of doing it. Right? So, that's where the block was. The block was open down the line, so I hit it down the line. That's an after-the-fact assessment of what they just did. In the moment, they just reacted to what the problem was in front of them, and they did the thing that was necessary to solve it. I'm not sure they're computing that in the moment in their head, right? And I don't know that we want to try to give kids the idea that is a computation that's going on inside their head in the moment. I think we want them to play the game and respond to the environment around them, and with the intent to score and the intent to win and the intent to be great teammates. And that there's nothing wrong with talking strategy, but I think that if you ask a seventh grader who hit a ball down the line for a kill. What is going on? Why are we getting these strange posts?
Question.
It's very odd.
Sorry.
All right. I think that person's out.
All right.
Well, yeah, that's some strange questions. That made me uncomfortable. But I just think that when we approach it from that standpoint of trying to ask the question of kids, why did you do that?
Sure.
It's always going to be retrospect. It's never going to be actually, this is what I was thinking in the moment. And so I think that's an important thing to understand.
Okay. So let's jump back. Let's jump back a little bit to talking about the younger ages. Dealing with maybe some of the different personalities that you see. You've got the shy, timid kid, right, who doesn't really get aggressive. You've got the overly aggressive kid. Is this something they're just going to work out in play, or do you have specific ideas or strategies about dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, you sent me that question earlier in like, you know, kind of, these are some topics I might address. And I battle with that one because I think it's age group specific. You know, if you've got an 18-year-old playing on a team of kids that are all going to possibly be collegiate prospects, and you got a kid who's playing left back and she's going and digging balls in right back in front of the setter, and she's running around the court, and maybe my answer is going to be different than if it was an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. Although maybe not. I mean, Karch tells the story of how at UCLA they ran a 5-1 defense. Karch dug every ball and everybody else stood and watched. You know, I think so. There's a place for it even at the highest levels. But I think, you know, at the younger levels that we're referring to, this 8 through 14-year-old age, I would never dissuade a kid from being assertive or confident about going for a ball. I tend to try to avoid using the term aggressive, just because I think I want to use the same words in the gym of volleyball that would be used to describe a kid outside the gym. And, you know, a little girl who's 8 years old who's being told she needs to be aggressive in the gym is also being told outside the gym that aggressiveness is not a quality of a good member of society. So I think we need to be willing to support the idea that people are acting confidently and assertively, but not necessarily aggressively. And I'm never going to dissuade a kid from that in our gym, really at any age level. Hopefully just direct them how to use it a little bit more efficiently to help their team. If it is an older kid, if it's a younger kid, just keep being the best player on your team. You're going to eventually find a team where everyone's going to be like you, and then we're going to have to work on how we turn that awesome quality you have into a great teammate.
All right, one quick thing before you guys continue, since we clearly have either a bot or somebody messing around. We're ignoring the chat and we're ignoring the questions. So those of you who are legitimate attendees, you probably have the email for this. Use the email to submit a question if you got one. Otherwise, we're just going to carry on with Tim's questions and stuff that I insert.
That sounds good to me. There's some weird people in this world.
Yeah.
Length. This is maybe going back to your overall structure with the littles. What's kind of the length of their game time frames? Because I know sometimes attention span can be an issue with the very younger ones. You know, around that 7, 8-year-old range?
Totally.
So about how long are they going for?
The 6 through, or the 8 through 12-year-olds, so that's like the 3rd through 6th grade. Those kids are usually in our gym for about an hour and a half. And not that full, that's not all volleyball. There is some just pure fun and some, I guess, what some might refer to as physical literacy. But mostly to me, it's just like movement and just challenging them to figure out how their bodies work. You know, we might do some, well, the favorite game actually of all the kids in our 3rd through 6th grade program is Simon Says. But we do like a super amped up, difficult version of Simon Says that involves some pretty crazy movements on their parts. You know, being able to sit on the ground with one foot on the ground and one hand holding the other foot and stand up in that posture without anything except your foot touching the ground. Things that are extremely difficult for kids to do. And we managed to inspire them to go home and practice those things. So we actually get kids who will come into the gym a week after we asked them to try to do something that Simon Says, and they'll be like, I was practicing that at home. Can you please include that today in Simon Says? Because I think I got it down. Well, that's awesome to me. That's instilling an awesome acceptance of the need for a good movement culture in kids who are athletes instead of, but again, for me, it's that stuff's really about what you do at home. And so are they willing to actually, the fact that an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old is going home and practicing movement patterns or some sort of movement on their own time, that's fantastic to me. So we do incorporate that stuff into what we do. Not a lot. It maybe out of the hour and a half, it's maybe 15 minutes of that hour and a half. So they're usually playing volleyball of some sort for the 75 minutes of that 90.
Okay. Let's see. No, I answered all of those. So this is just kind of a general question. Does their favorite game change, or is it by age level, or is it pretty consistent?
I'm not sure it's really an age or ability. I think it's more individual. Okay. We've got kids in our gym who they love doubles, and so because we play a lot of doubles in our gym. It doesn't really matter what age group. We play doubles with the 3rd graders. We play doubles with the 18-year-olds. And some kids, that's just their game. They just love that, and that's what they want to play. If I let any group that came into our gym have a choice of what to play, there's definitely going to be a good portion of them who are going to say some form of doubles. The younger age levels, we do play I think it was it Holland or the Netherlands or somewhere, Denmark, where they created the game called Smash Ball.
Yeah, I know.
That was very focused on the spiking motion because they were trying to get more boys involved in playing the game, and they understood that the thing that boys wanted to do more than anything else was to hit the ball as hard as they could and have it bounce off the floor. So they created this game called Smash Ball, and we play that a lot in our gym. We play it with every age group. I love it. It's one of my favorite games. But with the younger kids, I think that's a big favorite of theirs because the opportunity to allow the ball to bounce, to catch the ball after it bounces, and then throw it to a teammate, and from that point forward, it's volleyball contacts. I believe that gives them a little bit more confidence in their ability to actually play the game. It gives them the self-efficacy, the belief that we can actually compete here. We can get a rally going because we can let that ball hit the ground, One of the sayings that I picked up from somebody along the way was that the volleyball is played at the speed of physics and gravity. And I don't think that the average 3rd, 4th, 5th grader has a brain that's capable of keeping up with that speed all the time. especially given all the other things that distract them in the middle of play. So if we can allow the game to slow itself down by adding in a bounce. We don't like to do the bounce for a long time because clearly that's one of the worst things you can teach a volleyball player to do is allow the ball to hit the ground.
Sure.
But we do it with the youngest kids because it allows them to have a sense of confidence in playing the game. And then once they get good at it and they feel like they want to be challenged, then we say, okay, let's play that same game with that same catch, but now the ball can't hit the ground. And there's usually a lot of frowning and a lot of moans, but then they go out and try it and they get good at it. So.
Okay.
I've got a question that I think is maybe appropriate here. I was just wondering, with all the games that you've got, what do you use for initiation for rallies?
Serving.
Okay.
I mean,
so what about in the case of your littles when they're missing tons of serves?
So we usually tell them, we want you to work on your serve because you want to get good at your serve. That's one of your goals of being here. Every kid comes in and play volleyball. They want to get good at serving because that's the way the game starts, you know. So we tell them, go ahead and go ahead and serve. If you miss your serve, either the ball that you were serving, it went into the net maybe and it comes back to you. But if it did go over the net and out of bounds or whatever, there's a coach there or someone else there who's going to hand you a ball and then you can just throw it over. Because we also want the other team to have the opportunity to play. That's how we usually describe it to the younger kids. Part of being here is that you're getting good, but also part of being here and being a teammate and being a member in this gym is helping the other people on the other side of the net get good as well. So we really want you to get good at serving because that's going to help the people on the other side of the net get better at passing. But if you miss your serve, let's just throw a ball over so they can work on pass, set, hit, or whatever it is we're working on in that moment. So it's usually, as far as things being initiated, it's very rare that a coach initiates a ball, only if we're shorthanded. Like if we don't have enough kids to be involved in that process, then the coach will be involved. But for the most part, it's always the kids being involved in initiating the ball. And as far as starting each rally, it's always going to at least be attempted to be started by a serve. You know, at the very beginning of a session where we've got the youngest kids in and they're not really good at serving or they have no confidence whatsoever in their ability to serve, we will give them an option. And I think that is a huge thing, being able to give kids autonomy at the age of 8 or 9 where they're not used to autonomy really at all. And say to them, hey, you can serve or you can throw it. It's up to you. I don't really care. Like, we just want to see you play volleyball. And so then we watch and we see which kids throw it in and which kids serve. And the kids that are throwing it in, maybe that's the kid that at the end of the session, we pull aside for 5 minutes and say, hey, here's some serving ideas that you can go work on at home so that next time you're here, you feel more confident about coming in and doing your serve instead of throwing it. You know, or we might just ask them, why are you throwing it? Why don't you feel like you want to serve? And I think that's a pretty big thing because a kid might say to you, my thumb hurts. You know, like, I don't want to serve because my thumb hurts. And the whole time you thought, she just doesn't believe in her ability to serve. But she sprained her thumb at school and she's like, I don't want to serve because my thumb hurts. We've had that. And so it's like, I think it's important to connect with them on that level of like, why aren't you serving? Or, you know, whatever the case might be. If a kid's not spiking, why aren't you jumping and hitting? Well, I rolled my ankle at school yesterday and I don't really feel good jumping, instead of us saying, you got to jump. So.
Right. How do you handle athletes with mixed skill levels when you're dealing with maybe kind of medium or smaller sized groups? We
mix them. I think that's nature at work. That's the way the entire natural world works. And for some reason, we as human beings have decided that the best way to challenge a kid is to put boundaries around them and separate them out and have them play with only kids of their age and only kids of their ability level. And that's how we get good. I totally disagree with that. I think the kid who's the best kid, who's playing, you know, what we might refer to as playing down, playing easy, playing with kids that are not as good as them, has just as much opportunity to learn and get better in that situation. Ted Crichton, who runs I think that's how you say his last name, he runs a soccer club in Minneapolis called Joy of the People. And he's got a fantastic program that he's running, and he's absolutely revolutionizing the way that I think he's revolutionizing the way that coaching is done for soccer. And that's one of his biggest points is you gotta go easy. You gotta play easy sometimes. And really, the more that you get an opportunity to play easy, the more you have an opportunity to explore your creativity. I know that as a coach. You guys should probably know that as a coach. I got better as a coach. I got better at playing volleyball when I started coaching.
Right.
And the kids I was coaching weren't anywhere near the level of player I was, but I was able to explore my own abilities, get creative, understand because I didn't have to be so invested in things like how am I going to actually pass this ball. I could start thinking ahead a little bit and start exploring the decision making more. And I think that's a really important thing that we don't allow for because we're constantly saying kids have to be in this area of full-on challenge all the time. I think we need that opportunity, especially at the youngest levels, to back off of challenge and give them success, give them a sense of confidence through playing the game and being good at it. And around peers who maybe aren't as good as them. And some of them might be, some of them might not. So I think we don't always 100% mix, but we definitely mix across a wide range I'd say with our entire club, all the way from 6-year-olds up to 18-year-olds.
Okay. Yeah, I like that answer. Definitely challenges some of the ways we've set things up with our athletes. So how do you handle, get any players, and maybe not at the youngest ages, maybe more, 11 or 12, who would rather just do traditional drills, and how do you encourage them in the process of playing?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely get that. I think you're going to get that your whole life. I mean, I go out to play in a doubles tournament, and I'll watch 35-year-old men warm up with some sort of drill that doesn't look like the game of volleyball, because that's what they think it takes to be good at volleyball. So I think part of it is education. Part of it is asking, good questions again. If you ask a kid, what do you want to do to prepare yourself to play in a tournament? So you want to get better at hitting. What do you think you need to do to get better at hitting? And if that kid comes back to you with an isolated, non-contextual, blocked training idea of a drill, and then they gave you an answer that you didn't like. So what do we do with answers we don't like? We ask better questions. So now I got to go to that kid with a better question. And so my question to them might be, well, what is it about hitting that you feel like you're struggling with? And that's going to then lead me down that road of how to get them to understand that they can work on all the things that they want to do while simultaneously getting better at a lot of other stuff while playing a game. I think that's, helping kids understand that. One big thing we do is we tell them I don't know if you're familiar with Trevor Reagan's Train Ugly and Learning Lab stuff, but his story about the jungle tiger versus the zoo tiger is a story we tell to every group that walks into our gym that's young, like every group under 14. We talk to them about that story. And what's the difference between a jungle tiger and a zoo tiger? And is the zoo tiger going to ever go hungry? No. Is the zoo tiger ever going to need a safe place to sleep? No. Is the zoo tiger ever going to struggle? No. But what's going to happen when you take that zoo tiger and you put it back in the jungle? And it's actually really comical how many kids will raise their hand and say, he's going to die. And they immediately go to the most morbid result, but that's just, but that's what we want. We want them to understand that these kids are going to struggle, or that the zoo tiger is going to struggle when it's actually put in reality, into real life. And so we talk to them about how the volleyball court, playing volleyball, is the jungle. It is it is chaotic. It's struggle. And the only way to get good at handling that is to just be in it. And fortunately for you, your failures don't mean that you die. They just mean that the other team scores a point, and then you get a chance to move on and try it again. And so I think, getting their mindset away from this perfectionist mindset, that's one of the things that I think hampers our sport more than anything else, is this emphasis we have on perfection in our sport, and we drill it and beat it into kids. And the kids that survive that and go on and play in college, and people hold them up as if they were the exemplaries that show that concept works. I don't buy it, because how many kids stop playing because they can't handle that level of focus on perfectionism? And how many kids who play in college, we're seeing it all the time right now with kids who do play in college, who are mentally breaking down because of that because of that perfectionist mindset that they've been trained to have. I just think I think we should never approach young players with that idea. It should always be about messy. It should always be about ugly and being okay with ugly. And that's a lot about the environment that you create, how coaches respond to mistakes, how teammates respond to mistakes, how parents respond to their mistakes. And if we can all be on the same page and respond to those ugly moments with joy and with understanding that this is all part of the process, and man, that was awesome, kids start smiling a lot more when they make mistakes, and they start laughing about it, and they start realizing this is just a game and I'm just having fun, and let's get on to the next point, because that last point it doesn't matter anymore.
And so similar question, as far as getting the parents on board the process, because what they're seeing is not what they would expect to see, especially if any of them have played in the past.
Oh yeah, there's two things that they don't see, or two areas where we get a disconnect between how we do things and what the parents are seeing. One is, if we get a parent who came out of a drill-based culture, a training culture, where they come in and they're expecting us to be tossing balls to a kid who's going to pass it back to us, or we're doing all these things that are very isolated, very individual based. Or two, they played volleyball and they know what volleyball is supposed to look like, which is kind of a weird thing. But they're expecting somehow for us to take their 8-year-old kid and in 8 weeks get that kid to be playing volleyball in that way that they think volleyball is supposed to look like. And so I think, again, that's a lot of education. And being very honest and upfront and vulnerable, in a sense, with them right from the start. Like, this is how we train in this, and I just used your term. You got me saying it. I don't normally say that word.
This is how we play.
This is how we do things in our gym. This is what we do. We play the game. And this is how we encourage and have patience, and how we point. That's one of our, we have this concept that I stole from Abby Wambach from her book, talking about how, as a teammate, she said on the national team they had this thing where when a teammate scored, you had to either be running or pointing, meaning you were running to them to give them a hug, or you were pointing at them from a distance to say that was awesome. And I've given that to my coaching staff, all of them across the board, and said, when somebody on your team does something well, you either need to be running or pointing. Now, we're not necessarily going to be running to give a hug, because we've got a lot of male coaches in a female gym, in a female sport, and that's not going to be accepted super well by everybody. But it's running to give a high five, or I'm pointing at you from a distance and saying that was amazing. And I think that's, if we can get parents to understand that that's how we do things, and that if they do those things too, that they're going to be helping their kid along the journey instead of hindering that journey. We talk a lot about the research that's been done about, was it Ron Brown or whatever, who did the research about the two questions that are, or the worst. College. They asked a bunch of college athletes, what's your worst memory of high school and youth sports, and what's your favorite memory? And a huge percentage of them said the exact same situation, which was the car ride home. And when he asked them to explain that, he said, what they found was the kids who that car ride home was their favorite memory of youth sports were the kids whose parents just showed them unconditional love regardless of the results of the game, regardless of the results of practice. And maybe didn't even talk to them about whatever the sport was, but actually just talked to them about their lives outside that sport. Or maybe the parents didn't say anything and they just let the kids sit in silence while they were, going through the self process of learning and stuff like that. And the kids who said that the car ride home was their least favorite memory was the kids who got in a car and the very first thing the parents decided to do was just be a critic and to start talking to them about what they did wrong and all the things they could have done differently. And those athletes who ended up being college athletes have said on many, many occasions that that's their least favorite memory of youth sports. And so we put that in front of the parents. We talk to them about that the most powerful words you can say to your kid after a practice or after a match, regardless of what the results were, is I love to watch you play. And if that's all you say and then you shut up, and I will tell parents that in a meeting, say those words and then shut up. Don't say another word until the kid decides to open up the conversation, because this thing that we are doing is not about you. It's not about your opinion. It's about your kid loving this sport for as long as possible and all the benefits that come from that. And you can be part of that or you can be a hurdle in that. And it's up to you as a parent. And I don't necessarily say it quite so aggressively as I just did, but sometimes I do. But I think it's, the parents who buy into that. I've had multiple parents over the years, even of our youngest kids, who come back to me and said, I took you at your word and I did what you said. And I found it has changed my relationship with my daughter, because now instead of getting into the car and telling me she doesn't want to talk to me, she gets in the car and wants to have a conversation with me. And that's really powerful. And as soon as a parent finds that moment, they're no longer a hinder in the improvement of their kid, regardless of the kid's age. They're going to end up being a facilitator for the progression of their kid. So,
who did you say you thought did that study? I'd be curious.
It was positive. I'm pretty sure I first came across it from Positive Coaching Alliance, which I think that's Ron Brown, maybe. I could be
for me to follow up on.
Yeah, I could be wrong on that. There's another one that I'm thinking it might have been, but I think that's who it was. And I could find it for you and send it to you as well. But it was a massive study. Like, they interviewed thousands of collegiate athletes and asked them a bunch of questions, but the main question that they asked all of them was, what's your favorite memory and what's your least favorite memory of youth sports? And it was an overwhelming percentage of the kids who said the same thing, the car ride home. And that's when they started really promoting that idea of saying, parents, the most important thing you can say to your kid is, I love to watch you play. I say it. That's the only thing I say. Like, I'm the club director. I don't coach a team. I'm out there in practice. I'm working with all the different kids in our practices. I'm at matches. I watch all the kids in matches. I'm taking notes. I'm observing. But when a kid comes up to me after a match, all I say to them is, hey, I love watching you play. That was awesome. And then at practice, maybe we'll have a conversation about what they need to work on. But, in that moment or after a practice, kid comes up to me, or was walking by me, I'll give them a high five and just be like, hey, I love watching you out there. That was awesome. And that's powerful for a kid. It's so inspiring. And just to see the level of confidence that can come just from having an invested adult in their life who is willing to say, I love to watch you play. I think that's really powerful.
Okay. We're getting pretty close to the end of my list of questions. How do you handle mentoring coaches. I think there's two parts to this question. The first part is in how you're doing the way that you're doing things, and the second is maybe you have a coach who still needs to improve their concepts and ideas of the game, and your environment in your gym is different than a traditional environment. So how do you go about teaching them how you do things, also teaching them what we're trying to accomplish in the game of volleyball at higher levels?
Sure. I think learning is learning. I don't think it matters if you're an 8-year-old girl trying to learn volleyball for the first time, or if you're a 25 or 45 or 55-year-old adult trying to learn how to be a better coach. I think learning is learning. And I think there's principles that apply to learning that at all of those levels. And I think if we can create an opportunity to apply those principles, we help our coaches get better. And I think one of the most important ones of those is we get better at what we do. The more time on task that we have, the better we get at it. And so one of the most important things, obviously, to become a better coach is to coach more. Find opportunities to coach more. We invite our younger, less experienced coaches into the gym during other practices so they can just hang out with more experienced coaches. John Kessel's famous for going through the 3 different ways we learn. One is if I tell you, one is if you watch, and one is if you discover it and do it on your own. And telling someone how to do something is the worst way to help somebody learn how to do something. Having somebody watch somebody do it is better, but still not the best. And then doing it yourself is always going to be the best way to learn how to do something. We do a little bit of both of the top two. We do very little of the bottom one with our coaches, even with our players. If I want a coach to get better at giving feedback, I'm going to put them in a situation where they have to give more feedback so that they can then learn how to give better feedback. And we're going to have, and again, it's, with our players, we see the game as asking a question of you, and then your movement, the action you decide to take, is your solution to the question that's being asked of you. I see it the same with coaches. This opportunity in front of you where you feel like you as a coach need to step in is your team or a specific player asking a question of you. How are you going to answer that question? What you do next is your answer to that question. If they give an answer that I, as their boss and their mentor, doesn't like, what do we do when we don't get a question? When we don't get an answer we like? We ask a better question. So I'm there to ask them better questions, or to provide an environment that asks them better questions so that they can come up with better answers. I think it's very much the same thing. We have this concept of including that pointing idea. I like to call the 3 Ps. It's patience, positivity, and pointing. So first off, how does you help anybody get better at anything? You got to have patience. You got to be willing to let them fail. You got to be willing to let them fail over time and not feel like you have to step in every moment to demand or point out where they failed. And then with positivity, I think there's just too much research right now, way too much evidence out there to show the benefits of positive interaction with people and how that affects the neurological levels of the brain, as well as the emotional response people have to the circumstances around them. There's so much evidence out there right now for the power of positive psychology and positive coaching that I honestly don't understand why people still use negativity when they coach. And when mentoring, if I'm in a situation where I am upset at a coach for how they handle the situation, I will not address it with them because I know that my negativity is going to interfere. So I will either have someone else who I can count on to be more positive than me, address it with them, or I'll wait until I can clear my mind, get in a more positive mindset, and then address it with them. And then the pointing thing. I think catching, that idea of catching people doing things right is super important. It's important for kids. We tell most of our younger level coaches, you have really one main job. Watch them play, and every time they do something right, make sure, not necessarily right, but when they do something awesome, when they do something cool, when they do something that obviously they are excited about, point at them or give them a high five. Catch them doing things right. I think that's the most underutilized and most powerful tool in a coach's toolbox. But I think as someone mentoring coaches, it's also powerful. Catch your coaches doing something right. Catch your coaches having an amazing interaction with an athlete, and after that interaction's done, go and give your coach a high five and say that was awesome. When a parent sends you an email and to tell you how much they appreciate something your coach did, share it with your coach. Make sure they understand that they're appreciated. I think that use of positivity to encourage coaches to be better versions of themselves is incredibly important and incredibly effective as well.
Yeah, that's. I think that covers my list of questions. I had a couple observations after listening through the session you had with Mark. Just struck a few ideas that I'd been thinking of.
Sure.
How one of Mark's posts, I think he was talking about technique. How our idea of technique could be the way something might look. And if you just look at the different styles of volleyball at the highest level in international play.
Absolutely.
I think it was 2014. I think it was 2014 World Championship. I was watching China play USA. You had the two best teams playing completely different styles. And yet I found myself at the time wanting to make my athletes play a style that I wanted.
Right.
Rather than being willing to let them explore different ways of playing the game. So that's just an observation. I'm not really asking a question there, throwing that out. And
I think, just if I could say something on that, I think that's a really important thing because I think that we have this tendency to come up with an idea of how we think the game should look, how we think the skills should look, and then I guess maybe the best analogy I've ever heard on this is we treat coaching as carpenters instead of gardeners. We create the blueprints in our mind or on paper of what we think it should look like. People say that sculptors do this too, like somebody who's got a big, huge piece of rock. I don't even know anything about sculpting, but you got a big, huge piece of rock. Sure. And in their minds somewhere, they're envisioning what their sculpture is going to look like after they chisel everything away. And I think that's what we see our jobs as coaches a lot of times is I'm a carpenter. I am going to measure everything twice, cut once, and if it doesn't work out, then it's their fault because I did my job right. And to me, it's not that. It's gardening, In gardening, you don't know what you're going to come up with. You follow all the right things that a gardener's supposed to do. If you're trying to grow a home garden because you're cooped up at home because you have a stay-at-home order and you're trying to grow some vegetables for your family to eat, and you follow all the techniques that are supposed to be followed for growing your tomatoes and your zucchini and your kale or whatever you're growing, you could do that 20 years in a row and never get the same product any one of those 20 years. Because gardening is actually a dynamic living system rather than this, linear, non-living product. And I think we have that tendency to try to treat athletes and teams as if they were machines instead of actually living products. And so I think if we could be more like gardeners, we would be better coaches.
Sure. And then my last follow-up thought, it's a little bit related. I found myself, when I'd be in disagreement with other coaches, I wanted to view not just volleyball and technique and training the players, but, coaching styles and system. I wanted as a younger coach, I thought there was the right, and a wrong, versus, now I look at things as, hey, maybe there's a better, more efficient way of doing things.
Right.
And what can I do? And then, an add-on to that would be, what's your goal? Like you established in the very beginning. For me, especially with the younger ages, I want them to enjoy the process. So is my method of approach to the game, putting right and wrong aside, is that matching my goal? Is it the best or most efficient way of matching that goal? And if someone's coaching in a manner that isn't, then I'm not going to be angry or upset of them. If I can encourage them to be more efficient, I will. Otherwise, that's their choice and their decision.
Yeah, I mean, I was just listening earlier today to John Kessel's podcast with the Coach Your Brains Out guys, and it's the one where they're celebrating his retirement, or talking about his retirement, and trying to get him on the show one more time, and just talking about his life as a coach and what he's done. And he made a point of that, like one of his big changes that he's made, and I've made it too, is that instead of looking at everything as in black and white, as right and wrong, it's more of a scale. I think somebody I can't remember who used the ideas of dials, like on a stereo, like a volume dial, where one at the zero of the dial is the absolute worst pass in serve receive you've ever seen, with the ball going into the stands, and at the 10 is what we're hoping for as a team based on what your team is doing. And in that area, there's a range of possible outcomes. And so it's trying to get kids to recognize that if I do these certain things, it's not about me being more right. It's about me being more efficient, or me being more consistent, and me then making my teammates better more often. It's about, and that goes back to our conversation we had with Mark, which was about the connections, about those interactions in our sport are way more important than the actual actions. And so, how can I contribute to the interactions of my team more so than, I think and again, I deal with teenage girls mostly, or younger girls, and I find that the vast majority of them are already way too much in their own heads, they're already too critical of themselves, and they already have way too much of a perfectionist mindset, because that's what our culture has pushed on them. And when you feed that with the typical verbiage of, let's go for a perfect pass, you need to be perfect, you need to have your platform perfect, you need to get a perfect bow and arrow, all this stuff, I think we feed that, and it just turns into a snowball that can just rip a kid apart. But when we open it up, Karch has one of my favorite sayings ever in the sport of volleyball, and it just flipped out of my head. It's, be consistently good, not occasionally perfect. That's all we need to ask of our players. Just be consistently good. You don't need to have a perfect pass ever. You don't need to have one single perfect pass your entire career as a volleyball player. But if you can be consistently good your entire career, you're always going to find a place on a team. Because that's what we don't have. No players tend to be consistently good day in and day out. That's Karch when he was a player. Consistently good. Occasionally perfect. And it was really fun to watch. But, I think that's a super important point for us to get across. And to go back to your mentoring question, I think that's a super important point to get across to coaches. You're not expected to be perfect. Just be consistently good. And if you can do that, then you're doing the right thing for the kids in front of you.
Awesome.
All right.
John, that's all the direct questions that I had. So if you want to open that up.
Right. Yeah, I've got two questions, and these are more, one could get us to an interesting discussion of something. The first one, though, Loren, how much, if at all, do you incorporate or set aside time for unstructured play for the kids?
you're going to have to define unstructured play, I think, because I think the true definition of that is there's 0 adults in the room dictating what happens. And because
That's basically what I'm thinking. The adults are only there to make sure that, there isn't something horrible that happens.
So you're asking if there's ever a time in our gym
to facilitate the kids to do whatever they want.
So you're asking how often do we just let the kids do whatever they want, and the adults are just there to be like safety agents, basically.
Basically, yeah.
We don't. Without being your definition, we don't ever do that. Well, we do it at open gyms. We don't ever do it at a practice.
That's what my thinking was. It wouldn't like a practice, except in perhaps you could think of it as less structured elements.
Yes. And that we do a lot.
But more in terms of, okay, yeah. My thought was, the bigger thought is, okay, you've got a certain amount of time in a week where you've got your own facility, so you can, I'm sure you've got more flexibility than somebody who's relying on an external facility schedule. But, do you, within your broad schedule, say, okay, these are times set aside for practice, these are times set aside, the kids can just come in and play however they like?
No, we don't. Because even though we do own our own facility, there is limiting factors in dealing with kids because they have school. And so we only have so many hours in the day in which our gym can actually be used for practices. And within that time, we don't. We do go a pretty far along the spectrum of unstructured play on one end and coach dictated, 100% dictated on the other end. We're pretty far on that spectrum. The vast majority of our... That's what I get for using my hands when I talk. Watch out. But we're pretty far along that spectrum as far as we've stolen Jean Couste's term of deliberate play more so than unstructured play. I do think there's an amazingly important part in an athlete's life for unstructured play. We do try to create those opportunities through things like open gyms. Summertime, there's a lot more of that. But as far as like an actual club practice goes, people are paying us money. There's a definitely part of me that's like, parents, you just dropped thousands of dollars on your kid to be part of my club, and all I'm going to do is open the door and let them come in and do whatever they want. I'm going to stand around and make sure they don't hurt themselves. That's you're towing with some pretty... Do I think it could be beneficial? Yeah, I do. Do I think we would then go out of business? Yes, I do.
All right. The last thing for me was, when do you get to the point where the kids are doing 6v6?
So we don't do it at all for 3rd through 6th graders. There's never a time during that period when they play 6-on-6. Once they hit the 13 and under age group and start playing on a team or start playing in one of our rec leagues, we do introduce 6-on-6 for them. But it's not the whole practice. It's not even a majority of practice. I would say if we do a 2-hour practice, 6v6 is going to be at absolute most an hour, but usually more like 45 minutes.
Okay. The reason I bring it up is because at the AVC I was in a conversation where it was a broadly international sort of thing. Doug Beal was kind of moderating it. And this particular conversation was on youth development, so different approaches. And, you brought up smash ball before. And the U.S., you could say, is behind in a lot of ways in terms of using small-sided games
yes,
in youth competitions. And I asked Doug, I was like, okay, well, I know John Castle's been pushing this for years and years. Why are we playing 6v6 12 and unders in JOs? But, qualifiers and national championships and all that. Why? And this isn't a knock on Doug per se, but his response was, to me, completely unacceptable. And it was basically came down to because people don't think it's real volleyball. So if USAV stops hosting 6v6 and goes to 4v4 or whatever, structure you'd prefer, then people will go away to AAU or JVA or something like that. So it's basically a fear-based response.
Yeah, and I understand where it's coming from, but I think if we look at other sports as guideposts, I think that we can see that wouldn't be the case if we actually took that risk. Because if you look at basketball, what's one of the largest growing sectors of basketball in our country right now? The 3-on-3 tournaments, the street ball tournaments. What's one of the biggest growing things? What's the biggest growing youth sport in the past 10 years? My understanding is USA Hockey. And how did they do that? By creating the smaller cross ice games that have smaller amount of kids, smaller courts. We see it in tennis where they're flipping the court. They're creating a court sideways on each side of the actual net to teach kids to play. And I think what you get, because we get that all the time. I mean, I had a grandma come up to me after 4 weeks of our 3rd through 6th grade program and said to me, so when are they going to play real volleyball? And I said, they're playing real volleyball every day. And she's like, no, I mean like they do in high school. And I was like, well, probably in high school. And she, I knew what she was asking. When are they going to play 6-on-6? And I was like, have you ever been to a 6-on-6 game for a 3rd grader, for a 4th grader? She's like, yeah, she was in it at the Y last year. And I'm like, okay, can you describe to me what that looked like? And it comes back to what Tim said earlier. Serve, 12 kids clapping, rotate, serve, 12 kids clapping, rotate, serve, serve, maybe a pass, maybe a bump, maybe a kid actually swung at a ball and totally missed it and hit the ground. But you're never actually playing anything that even resembles the game that we are wanting them to learn how to play. And so I think that I am 100% in agreement. We don't do a 12 and under team at our club. We chose to not. We did for the first 3 years, and we chose to get away with that because I felt like that was a terrible environment in which to teach kids how to play. We get good at what we do, and the majority of time at a 12 and under level, you are standing watching someone else do something. And so that's what you're getting good at. Now, are there kids at 12 years old or 11 years old who can play the game with full-on all the skills involved, pass, set, hit, block, dig, all of that? Absolutely, there are kids like that. I mean, you can go on YouTube and watch teams from Texas and California and wherever else you want to watch. You can see these kids, and they look like high school teams. So are those kids out there? Absolutely. Should they be playing 6-on-6 as a competition format? Maybe. But they certainly have much more right to it, in my opinion, than a bunch of kids who don't even know how to pass a ball or hit a ball. Those kids need to be given an opportunity to learn the game by doing it as often as possible, and that's by doing, meaning in being involved. Kids don't understand at the age of 8 or 9, kids don't understand the role of being a teammate when someone else is passing the ball or those kind of things. Their whole concept of me playing volleyball is, did I touch the ball? Was I involved? If they're not involved, they weren't playing. And so create games where they're involved, where they're playing. Doubles is, in my opinion, is the best because girls love to sign up for things at 8, 9, 10 years old with their best friend. Let them come in with their best friend. Let them play volleyball, doubles for 2 years with their best friend, and they're going to get really good. Something that I thought of in the middle of all of that thing I just spieled out, which I meant to mention earlier. And I think this is powerful, and this is why I'm saying it, because when this was suggested to me to think about, I fought it at first, and then I eventually realized this was just an immensely powerful thing to think about. And it comes from a guy named Sam Jarman, who's a sports psychologist over in England. And he said to me that commitment, sacrifice, hard work, the grind, all of these things that we believe make an elite level athlete. All those they are what loving the game and loving your teammates looks like from a third person's perspective. So if you can create an environment in which the kids learn to love the game and learn to love their teammates, they will work hard, they will commit, they will go through the grind, they will be assertive or aggressive or whatever you want them to be without you having to harp on them about it every day. You got to work hard. I stopped saying that to the kids in my gym. If there's a kid in my gym that I think needs to work harder, my first question is going to be to myself, why is that kid not working as hard as they could? What can I do to inspire them to work harder? And a lot of that, to me, comes down to, are they having fun? But it also comes down to the social, cultural environment in which the kid's in. Maybe they had a bad day at school. They're just in a bad mood. They are young kids. They don't know how to regulate that stuff. And yet we bring them into a gym and try to run them through boring drills and ask them to pay attention when all they did all day at school was the exact same thing. I mean, that sounds like hell to me, to be honest. But
I mean, the thing that gets to me is you talked about, a basic factor in working with these young kids is trying to make things simple for them as they're learning to play. And yet 6v6 is the most complex form of our sport. Going back to the interactions discussions, you've got 6 factorial or whatever the calculation is of relationships in a 6v6 game. In a 2v2, it's 1. It's just the two of you. Just keep it simple. If you're playing the first ball, you know who's got to play the second ball and vice versa. And you take a lot of that stuff out. And then obviously as they get better and more mature and understand, you maybe 3v3, maybe 4v4, and you can raise the level of complexity just like you do with the challenges of the game of, okay, now we're not going to do the catch. We're going to try to actually play the ball, or we're not going to allow the bounce. You're going to have to catch it without the bounce. Right. So why do we think in simple terms from a training perspective, but then automatically put them in the most complicated, position possible when it comes to playing? Right. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've actually thought about doing, just really taking exactly what they're doing in the Netherlands, and that is with our, at least maybe like the 3rd and 4th graders, just doing a rec league that is smash ball. And that's their competition. Like inviting parents in to watch a competition of the kids playing smash ball. Rather than feeling like we're somehow preparing them to play 6-on-6 all the time. I think that's another issue that we have with it. Like 2-on-2 it's an Olympic sport. It's a valid option. Why do we have to feel like we're always preparing these kids to play 6-on-6? Why can't we be preparing these kids to play sitting volleyball? Why can't we be preparing them to play 9-man volleyball in the streets of San Francisco? Why can't we be preparing them to play foot volley? Or in all honesty, why can't we be helping prepare them to play basketball in college? Like, where is it written that we have to always have that in mind, that we are preparing them to play 6-on-6? That's not my goal. My goal is to get them to love something enough to put some time into it. That's it. And if in the end volleyball isn't that thing and it's basketball or lacrosse or soccer, great. But I think that the way the vast majority of coaches coach It teaches kids that it doesn't matter if you love it, you have to do it. And that, I have a big issue with that. Because those are the kids who, when they're done with college, have an identity foreclosure, have no idea what they're doing with their lives, because the two things they've done their whole life, neither of which did they love, were taken away from them, and now they have a life in front of them, and they don't even know how to love anything because they've never been allowed to love it their whole lives.
Oh, yeah. In this country, what's the percentage of players who finish college and actually continue to play as adults? Professionally or in local adult leagues? It's
super
tiny.
low, way too low.
Tiny.
Like embarrassingly low. The amount of kids who, just in our area, who go off to play college volleyball and come back and they're like, I don't want to touch a volleyball for the rest of my life. It's a game, and that's your response to it? Like, after you've just gone through college and then you say to somebody, I don't ever want to touch a volleyball the rest of my life. Like, that is more sad to me than anything else that a person could say, Whereas if you get a player who comes back from college and the first question they give to me, like I just got one like 3 days ago from a girl that finished college in Colorado. She's moving back here because all this stuff that's going on. She's going to be back for the summer, and she's done with school because she's now graduated, even though they don't really know how that's working right now. But she's coming back, and she sent me a message on Facebook, and it's like, hey, where can I play doubles when I get back? That's what we want, right? That's that's the first question we want to hear from a kid that just finished college playing volleyball. Is where do I play? Where do I play next? Not, I don't ever want to play again, or I need to take a break because I'm burnt out. Like, to me, that means we've taken a game and we've turned it into a job, and we've turned it into a job that doesn't involve joy. I mean, anybody that works at a job that they don't enjoy for 12 years is probably not going to want to ever do that job again. Doesn't matter what the job was. If it happens to be a game that was created for people to love and enjoy, that's sad to me. And I think that starts at a young age, where we have an opportunity to help these kids fall in love with the game and then pursue that love and get whatever they want out of it. Because ultimately, that's another thing that's hugely important to me, is recognizing this is their journey. It's not about me. It's not about me dictating what they can and cannot do. It's not about me deciding their fate in this sport. It's about them getting out of it whatever they want. And if all they want out of it is to walk into the gym and hang out with their best friend for 2 hours, if I can give them the space to do that, then I'm a positive influence on their life.
Yeah. One of the coolest experiences for me was when I was in England. My second year, I had a girl, I believe from Denmark, who was just there on Erasmus, which is their European, foreign exchange sort of thing.
Right.
She was only there for one semester. But she came out and she tried out and she made the team, and she, practiced with us, and she was in the competitions that we did in different roles. And at the Christmas dinner, or the semester end dinner before everybody took a break for the holidays, she was going back home because she was done. So she came up to me. She's like, I really enjoyed this. I think I'm going to go and try to find a way to play again when I get back home.
Nice.
Implying that she hadn't been playing until she came to Exeter. Right. And I didn't ask her why she decided to play at Exeter. We didn't have that conversation, but it's like, oh, okay. This kid got back the love that apparently she had at one for the sport. Cool. I must have done something right.
Yeah, those are major successes to me. Anytime a kid comes to me and says, you've helped me rekindle my love of volleyball, my first response is, that's amazing. And then usually, just for information purposes, I like to ask them, why'd you lose it? What happened? And because it helps me understand what they're going through, so I can help the next kid maybe get through it a little quicker.
Sure. All right, I don't have any more questions. Tim, you got anything left?
No, I think we covered everything.
Right. Well, we've run quite long, so we probably should wrap it. All right. For those who did stick it out, when we're involved in our bot or troller or whoever that was, seemed to leave after they got ignored. So it might have to be a strategy moving forward.
Yeah. Works with kids too.
All right. Thanks. I'm sure we'll see you guys around for other talks or whatever.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for doing this, John. Thanks for doing this, Tim. Appreciate it. See you guys.
Thanks. Thank you,
See ya.
Lauren, for having me. Thanks, John, for putting this together.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.